mashallah, I'm so proud of all of you. I know that you know, that the classes are quite long and it really requires a lot of himma and a lot of enthusiasm to continue. And I do recognize that the classes sometimes go really deep into, just different things that we may not necessarily, uh, relate to it right now. But at the same time, some information that, can sometimes be very inspirational. Other times it's like, okay, just good to know, and you just move on. So definitely, I do recognize that the classes require a lot of patience and talab al-ilm. I do recognize that. And speaking of which, this is where we left off at with our tafsir. Let's just go over it really quick. We went over basically the different recommendations from the Prophet ﷺ in regards to basically this portion of this ayah. وَأَنَّ هَذَا صِرَاطِي مُسْتَقِيمًا فَاتَّبِعُوهُ. That this is my straight path, then follow it. And of course, following it was still, I guess an ambiguous word right there. So we needed to go to the Quran, the Hadith, and we needed to see the Sunnah, or the Hadith are the Sunnah, but we needed to see the Sunnah and we needed to see the Athar, which are basically the narrations that the Sahaba had done in regards to what does that mean? What does that look like? So first we have to know, well, what is وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا السُّبُلَ? What does it mean of the different various paths? And we talked about different various paths, meaning for the variant religions, meaning variant legislations, meaning variant interpretations, even to Islam itself. So, in other words, one thing I would say, I've had reverts really get confused and tell me that they were at one point in search for the right religion, and now that they are Muslim, now they feel more confused because now they have to search for Islam in Islam. And I would say, well, that is, it's true, but it's not true. Let me explain. So when you're talking about Islam, you are basically considered that you are within the perimeter of whoever says La ilaha illallah dakhala al-Jannah. Okay, that's the big parameter. You say La ilaha illallah, you're going to go to Jannah. Okay, now then it comes into that area, okay, that area where how far do you want to go? How high up do you want to go up to Jannah? So then you're going to do another piece of homework, which is try to get that ilm and don't just follow this type of Islam that everybody else is practicing. You want to try to be a person of enlightenment, to basically follow Islam and know that a lot of the Muslims, they had adopted a lot of different paths. So you had some that probably adopted some traditional, I would say, practices that may had embedded throughout the years, throughout history, and every single country has its own, let's call it history, and its own trace of how and where they traced a lot of their traditions from. Is it coming from a certain madhab, or is it coming from a certain tradition that probably was influenced by Christianity or Hinduism or Judaism or maybe Zoroastrianism or whatever it is? Where is this coming from? So that's why it's important to seek ilm. It's to help you grow. But one other thing I would like to say is that sometimes in some groups that want to seek ilm, I would say, they would get too detailed in perhaps certain debates in Aqidah especially, and then that takes away the beauty of Aqidah. So they'll get into the different sects of Aqidah, and then you're starting to wonder, well, where's the Aqidah that I'm supposed to be studying? And then they get into all these debates. That's one thing that I would say my recommendation If you want to study Aqidah, avoid studying these sects because it's going to take you away from the focus of how you get into that inspiration of what the Quran and Sunnah wanted you to get into. So I would say, all these different groups, if you're not ready to study it, try to find teachers that will get you to studying Islam in a way that is also helping you connect on to the resources, know the right resources to hold on to, let's call it the Quran and Sunnah. So learn Quran first. That's number one. If you are capable of learning Lugha Arabiya, that would be excellent. At least the resources to help you understand the Quran. If you're learning Arabic, I'm not talking about conversational Arabic here. That does help definitely, but I'm speaking about the Arabic in the in that piece of it that can help you understand at least the Quran. So when you are reading the Quran, you can get, a certain amount of understanding of what you're really reading, and not necessarily really, really deep, but at least that. I do have a set of lectures that I had done a while back. They're called um, I think unencoding or coding Quran or something like that. They're in 14 different lectures that I had done. It's a whole series, 14 different lectures or something. I think that's what it was. And they give you 80% of the most frequently common and the frequently used words in the Quran, and you would be capable of understanding at least 80%. And there's a packet there, the packet that, you know what, maybe I should show it to you from now. I'll show it to you right now and actually take you there. Hold on, let me take you there and show you those that those, let's see, so they're called coding Quran, and I'm just gonna put Aisha was right there and show you that. Okay, here we go. There you go. This is it. So this is it. You can see right there, it's giving you like the number
Shifa,
decoding Quran. Can you hear me, dear?
Shifa, we can't see the screen.
Oh,
It's
you
still
can't see the
there.
screen?
That's still for too big.
Oh,
I
yeah,
see it.
Now we can.
well, yeah. So, so those are basically 14 different lectures. This is actually part of it. Okay. And if you just put code in Quran and you can get those lectures, and plus it's basically describing the 80, no, it's the 80, but 80 words. You know what? Let me press on one of them, and I think I even have it in the description. Let me just stop it right there. And I should have it in the description. Let me see, is this it? This is it. I do have it in the description of every single video, the PDF, and you can actually have those vocabularies at hand. Okay, so this is really, really important to learn. So even if you don't go in extreme detail in learning Islam, learning at least, let's say, the foundations is the most important start, because all the other things can sometimes get you into, well, I don't have time, or can sometimes be, I would say, hard to keep up. So I would say start with that. If you could also learn the resources of understanding, kind of like the hadith. So I do have another series. It's called The Evolution of Muslim Thinking. I know that that one can sometimes be, what can I call it? I mean, I can call it maybe too academic, but I'm going to put it right there. Evolution of Muslim Thinking. Okay, I'm going to show it to you. And here we go. I'm going to, share it right there. It's called Evolution of Muslim Thinking. Let me just find it. No, Muslim Thinking, and I'm going to put my name. All right. And this is going to be extremely helpful. Here we go. There are 13 different videos right there. It's a whole playlist. And what it does, there. Approximately maybe 150 slides. And if you ask me for those slides, I'd be happy to give them to you, but I think they're available on, on my website. But anyhow, so there are 14 different lectures, and what they do is that they break down every single foundation in Islamic sciences. So whether if we're talking about Quran, we're talking about the history of the Quran tajmi' or the history of combining the Quran, or talks about the Sunnah, talks about those references, talks about the different things that happened throughout Islamic Muslim history. It also talks about the Sunnah, what it means, hadith, authentic, not authentic, how did they get there, who are these figures that combine the hadith, the Islamic schools. We're talking about the Hanafi, Shafi'i, Maliki, etc. What does it mean? Are they the only ones? And giving you the key differences to kind of help you navigate with these Islamic sciences. This one actually has, very important information in regards to understanding Islamic sciences. Really important. So you could actually find it easily, and inshallah, it will give you, I would say, very good foundation and very good helpful resources to help you, inshallah, understand at least navigate those Islamic sciences, in helping you understand, okay, how do I understand all of these different paths around me? So I do also get into answering the questions, even on a political level. Like when we look at, these different Islamic groups, which one is right? Which one should I follow? What should I do? I also get into that as well. And I go in lots of details. And alhamdulillah, it had been very successful for many that did watch those series, and it kind of gave them, I would say like think of it as those pair of glasses to really see through those different those different sects, or those different groups, or the most important pieces of Islamic science. Is like, okay, I get where this is coming from. This is what is extremely important for me, is that I understand when I was trying to study Islamic sciences, and then I remember that day when my professor was, of course, going to us and telling us about the fiqh, and I was so confused, and he was teaching us at that moment fiqh al-Hanafi, and I got so frustrated, and I said, each one is trying to prove his point, and each one's trying to say, their piece of evidence, and they're trying to attack the other. What is all going on? Why can't they just unite together, and can't they just, accept one another? And the professor at that moment said, did you take the introductory class for Islamic sciences? And I said, no. He said, okay, you need to leave this class and you need to sign up for that class because you're definitely confused. And that's what I did. Now, this is extremely important to understand in understanding, the fiqh, and understanding these debates, and understanding these groups and Islam, finding Islam in Islam. You really need to understand that evolution of Muslim thinking to understand what really happened and how to understand all of this. And it will help you answer a lot of those questions that I personally had at one point. I personally was so confused. So, okay, why are the Sufis doing this? Why are Salafis doing this? Why is Ikhwan doing this? Why is everybody attacking everybody after all? Why can't you just be together? Is it an attack or is it not? So, how do you understand all of those different things in Islamic history? And this is extremely important because once you understand those details, then of course, it will help you navigate yourself as well. That's how I describe it. You can navigate on your own. You're like, okay, now I recognize where I'm at. Without understanding that evolution of Muslim thinking, you're really going to feel like there's so many questions. Why is this happening? Where is this all coming from? And this is why it's important to understand the evolution of Muslim thinking, because if you're confused about why this is, why this is happening like this, and why they're debating like this, why are they talking about it like this, then you really need to go back to it in order to help you. I would say, put these fragmented pieces together. Think of it as a puzzle. And you've got these little pieces, and you're like, okay, I recognize that they're trying to form a picture, but then what is that picture? But imagine that you didn't really know what that picture was going to be, and you're just having all these little 500 pieces of puzzles, and you're trying to put these together, but you don't have a picture in mind. So you're not really sure what is that. Is it, I don't know, a big frog, or is it a forest? Not until you know what those are, what those fragmented pieces are trying to make, are you really going to be capable of understanding how to put these 500 pieces of puzzles together. And that's the same thing. You know, the evolution of Muslim thinking is trying to give you not all the details of how to put these pieces of puzzles together, but the evolution of Muslim thinking is trying to give you the picture. Okay? That's exactly what it is. I'm not giving you all those fragmented pieces and telling you how to put them together, but I'm giving you the picture, the big picture, and trying to help you understand these puzzles and how to connect them and what these pictures are really going to frame. And then once you study Islamic sciences, that's when you're capable of, I would say, connecting further these pieces of puzzles. And that's when you would be capable of understanding more and more as you go deeper and deeper in studying Islam. You're going to be basically seeing closer, and you're going to learn. Remember, when one thing I love about putting and making puzzles is learning how to be patient in getting to the final stage. This is extremely important. In Islam, it doesn't tell you to put pieces of puzzles together, but it tells you do things like memorizing Quran, do things like taking the time to seek ilm, because this amount of patience that you spend in seeking ilm, that's what will expand in your capacity to get to the potential of becoming a person of dedication. That's what Islam is all about. It's about one, gradually putting you on this, remember fattabi'u, and we talked about the gradual process. We talked about repetition, and we said that that's what's going to get you into the level of determination. Now, speaking of which, we talked about how Abdullah ibn Mas'ud said, well, تعلموا العلم قبل أن يقبض. قبل أن يقبض. Seek ilm before it is lifted, before it's not there anymore. And we talked about lifting ilm basically means that the scholars will not be available anymore because the scholars will die out. That's one thing. Number two is that the ilm itself in Islam, and especially in Islam, is the kind of ilm that is based on al-wahi. Therefore, it's not based on experience. And this is very important to keep in mind. We get a lot of people coming into Islam and saying, I tried putting hijab on, it wasn't for me. I tried praying, I didn't feel anything. And we would say, wait a minute, what you were trying to do is experiment. Islam is not an experiment. It's not based on experience, and it's not some kind of a scientific method to somehow test if it works or not. Islam is based on wahi. Islam is based on wahi, meaning you recognize where the right path is, and then you continue the road, and the end is Jannah. Indeed, you may become Muslim. You may probably do your best to become a better Muslim, but all you're seeing is probably calamities passing, but just piling up over you. You lose your job, your family abandons you, you probably get diagnosed with some dangerous disease, and you're like, wait a minute, this was supposed to bring me to لا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون. All I got was more and more khawf. Where is this taking me? Islam is telling you, wait a minute. The doors may indeed close up on you, whether in your your financial life or social life, or friends may give up on you, etc. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Prophet ﷺ had taught us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala إِذَا أَحَبَّ الْمُؤْمِنِ ابْتَلَاهُ, if He loves a believer, He will test him. What kind of a test? Close many doors on them, perhaps doors that they wanted open, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will close certain doors because He wants one door open to you, which is the path to Allah Almighty. Humayda, go ahead, dear.
Shifa, how can we differ punishment and test? Is a punisher for the test?
Good question. How can we differ punishment from a good test? If you
Mm-hmm.
feel that you're starting to get distant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's a punishment. That's a punishment. That's a very dangerous test. But if you feel that this calamity, this hardship got you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then this is a ni'mah in the image of niqmah. Then this is a good thing in a package that may seem like it's a bad thing. Think of it this way. You are going through some illness, God forbid. And then they would give you a certain medication. This medication doesn't necessarily cure right away, but the doctor is basically giving you this medication, and they tell you that if you were to take the painkillers, that it may actually cancel out certain the potency or the potency of that medication, and then they will tell you, well, I want you to be patient. And then you say, but I'm feeling, hey, this is happening and certain changes in the body, etc. So they'll tell you, well, that's actually part of the side effect for the medication, but that's also good news for us that the medication is right now doing what it needs to be doing. So once you feel certain symptoms that you are starting to get away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's when you know it's a punishment. That's number one. Number two, when you get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's when you know that this medication, which is looking like an injection or looking like it's taking away certain things away from you, that's basically getting through that process of getting you healed faster. So just like think of it this way. Maybe taking away certain sugars or taking away certain foods away from you. It feels like, oh my God, the first week, it feels like, oh my God, I'm craving these sugars. I'm craving these I guess caffeine dose or whatever it is. I'm craving it so badly. But then an expert in diets and dietitian and all of that, they'll tell you, guess what? That's a sign that your body is actually right now in deficit of these sugars. Right now, it's going to start using the stored sugars, the stored fat. This is a good sign. You craving is a good sign. You feeling that you want it so badly is a good sign. And then at that moment, you're then enjoying. Once you start passing that stage of, that first week, then you're starting to now see that every time I crave it, that's when my body is using the stored fat. That means I'm I'm basically either whether you're looking to lose weight or you're looking to get better fit or you're looking to get healthier, etc. Now you're starting to get into the process of enjoying that pain. Same thing if you're working out. In the beginning, it feels like, oh my God, the cramping on my legs, the cramping on my hamstrings, the cramping on all these. You feel like, oh my God, this is so painful. But then the expert will tell you that's a sign your body is basically making now, making muscle mass, and right now it's creating muscles. This is a good sign, not a bad sign. Unless you're feeling pain, it's a different, real pain, it's a different story, okay? But that's the thing. That's one side. But the other side to your question, well, how do I know that the pain that I'm going through is not a result of, let's call it the wrong consumption, the wrong, the wrong behavior? There isn't really one specific way that we could know that, yes, I'm going through, let's say, this illness in order to basically punish me for maybe a wrong thing that I had done. It is possible. But if you are to look at it just from that angle, that yes, it's a punishment that I had done, and feel that yes, I'm getting punished. So therefore, this pain is a result of a sin that I had committed. It is possible. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted you to look into every calamity and every pain that you go through from the sign and from the angle of hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And just like Prophet Yunus alayhi salam, when he was in that darkness within the belly, of course, of that whale, لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. And this is extremely important, that recognize that it is a possibility that some of the pains that you may be going through may be a punishment, but that punishment is basically to take away and basically cleanse you from the implication of that sin that you had committed. Look at it from that angle rather than look at it that, you know what, I'm doomed. Because the second that you look at yourself that I am doomed, this is it. I'm never going to be forgiven, and not see it that it's cleansing me. It's basically taking away all the implication of what I had probably committed. And if you are to look at it that you are doomed, that's when you will get into the stage of yes, of losing hope. And Islam does not want you to lose hope. Islam wants you to look at it from an angle. Alhamdulillah. The sabr is this first stage, enduring the pain and knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with every single thorn that you would be pricked, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will remove the pain, will remove a sin based on the amount of endurance and the amount of patience that you put in. Whether this was a punishment or whether this was just a test. Even if it's a punishment is a test. So, enduring the pain and enduring the hardship, what does it mean to endure the pain? What does it mean to go through this hardship and be patient about it? What it means is that you're staying away from what is called at-tasakhut. What is it, tasakhut? If you were to say the word, attempt to say the word tasakhut, just say the word tasakhut. What you feel, ta sa, and then you just feel it right there in your throat. It doesn't feel good to say the word at all. It does not feel good to say the word. It just feels like you're really spitting it out and throwing it up. And that is actually quite true. That's what tasakhut is. Tasakhut is when you complain and you start spitting out You start spitting out your feelings, your ventilation, how you're feeling, you're angry, you're basically getting into this type of this type of I guess of a psychological situation where you're just damning the situation that you're in. That's tasahhut. But the other way that a Muslim would basically relate to pain is not tasahhut, but is number one is sabr. Is sabr means that I do not curse the situation that I'm in, but I endure the pain and I recognize that it's a pain reducer, it's a sin reducer, and therefore I would recognize that it's a healing process. That's number one. Number two, I wouldn't complain too much about it, but I would go into attempting to go and transition from the state of sabr to the state of rida. What is الرضا? الرضا is when I'm in a state of content. Wait, what does that mean? Like رضا mean acceptance? Yes, that's another stage. That's the stage that you're trying to get to, and not many people get into that stage, which basically is the stage of being content, being happy, and enjoying it. Did you just say happy? Yes. Do I have to be happy? You don't have to be happy, but you would be in the stage of sabr. In the stage of rida, not very many people actually get to the stage of rida. That's a stage of prophets, and just like that's just like the Prophet ﷺ stage of prophethood. And he was saying when he was going through the loss of his own son, he would say, إن العين لتدمع وإن القلب ليحزن وإن على فراقك يا إبراهيم لمحزنون. He was saying, well, really sad. Our eyes tear, our hearts ache losing you, but at the same time, ولا نقول إلا ما يرضي ربنا. We only say what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is content of. So what are you looking at? You're not looking at yourself being content. You're seeing through this whole situation. You're like, as long as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is content, that's all that I care about. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is content, if that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, then I recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would only will what is good, would only will what is for my sake. So I'm going to embrace Allah's will, and I'm going to continue to wish for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rida. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would tell us about those people that would be living in sabr and those that would live radiyallahu anhum wa radu anha. They would live in a state of radiyallahu anhum. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is content over them. Why? Because radiyallahu anhum wa radu an. Because they embraced Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rida. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted them and embraced them. That's a different level. Not all people make it there, but at least try to embrace Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Try to embrace giving yourself that vision, that discipline, that training. How do I go up the ladder of being a person of accepting and embracing the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He is the one that gives me the level in that uh, the calamities that will only be for my sake. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Why Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim? Because even if you're going through calamity or a hardship or a challenge, know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy encompasses all, and therefore, even if He may prick you with a certain calamity, remember His mercy contains you. His mercy contains you. And that's why you always read Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin. What are you doing? You're not caging yourself that this situation, this hardship that you're in is going to be, let's call it the situation that is going to be forever, the situation that is going to be shaping you. But no, you're looking at this situation that this is temporary because I'm actually looking at the akhirah. Maliki Yawmiddin. He's the owner of Judgment Day. He'll embrace me with all his mercy. So I'm seeking out in redirecting my focus to see in mercy. Okay, now having that being said, let's go on with Sahl ibn Abdullah al-Tustari or Tustari or Testuri. Different ways to say his name. A Tustari is what I guess or Tustari is what they wanted us to say it in. Okay, Sahl ibn Abdullah al-Tustari, I want you, we're going to go and learn more about this person because this person is actually a key figure. So here we go. Here we go. We're going to search for him and I'm going to teach you how to do it. So you're going to go all the way there and we're going to go right there. And remember, we do have the ability, especially with this AI thing, to actually translate it. So here we go. We are going to Siyar A'lam al-Nubala. This is a very important resource. And of course, in Islam Web, they basically you didn't need to download the whole 23 volumes or 25 volumes because it's available for you right there. And plus, you get the chance to even translate it. It's not always the most accurate translation. We had seen the horrible translation that sometimes it did with getting some scholars pregnant, basically. Remember that when they got, instead of translating it, that he was basically carrying the and translated it as he was pregnant and definitely not always accurate. Okay, I'm going to do the job right here and make it easy. Who is Sahl ibn Abdullah al-Tustari? Let's say he said شيخ العارفين الصوفي الزاهد. شيخ العارفين. What do you mean by عارف? The scholar and the main sheikh. When you look at the word sheikh in the beginning, the word sheikh used to refer to somebody that was old. Later on, the word sheikh started referring to somebody that is basically on the top of wisdom, on the top of ilm, and basically is, kind of like the main teacher or the main preacher or at least the main mentor as well. But when you say al-arifin, that was a position that the Sufis basically used for the different levels of what they basically considered as the levels of maqam. Okay, hold on. What do you mean maqam? What are we talking about? The maqam. I thought maqam was related to music and, nahawan, sika. No, no. There's a maqam means stage. Okay, maqam means stage. There are maqamat for stages of voice tones. That's not what we're talking about. In the Sufi groups, and not everything about Sufism is wrong. Not everything is a bid'ah related. There's a lot to learn from Sufism, a lot to learn from Tazkiyah, and a lot of those that I would say, held onto the paths of Sufis. So many times they really did get way off from this kind of Sufism. But at the same time, those that may sometimes, I would say, attack Sufism can also get into some form of extremism in attacking everything about Sufism. But we try to stay moderate. We try to stay basically unbiased and take the ilm wherever it may be. So this Abdullah Tustari, remember, who's actually quoting from him? That was al-Qurtubi. That was al-Qurtubi quoting from him, and al-Qurtubi was also regarding him as a key scholar that we had to learn from. And what was he labeled as? What was he described as? A Sufi Zahid. What does it mean to be Sufi? Before, to be Sufi actually meant to be a person that was keen on working in tazkiyah. And within the Sufi school, there are different maqamat. Maqam stages. The lowest maqam is, well, basically the murid, the student. The student would have a sheikh. The sheikh would train the student, would mentor the student on how to, one, learn the ilm of tazkiyah, and then would discipline the student. What, the sheikh is going to discipline the student? Like, what do? Carry a stick? Not only that, but they may use different methods. It's not necessarily that, but it would be a halaqah that they would join together, and he would probably mentor them and tell them, I need you to memorize, let's say, maybe two pages this week, or two pages every single day of this week, or I want you to do Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad 1,000 times, or I want you to do La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah 100 times, and I want you to wake up every single morning. We're going to be fasting together to basically support one another in learning how to do that tazkiyah. We're going to try to visit perhaps the elderly this week. We're going to go together, maybe visit the graves together to basically get the sense of what it feels like to be dead, what it feels like to recognize what these dates actually mean, to let kafa bil mawti wa'idha, to basically train us. So the sheikh would do somewhat of a hands-on in mentorship, and this really is necessary. This is extremely needed because we need shuyukh that are close and basically overseeing our stages of learning our Islam. During our times, they will not necessarily like that. So if the sheikh, and I remember some of the students, sometimes I would say, we need to do this, or, you probably need to give up on maybe smoking, or you need to give up on this. And some of them were offended because in a Western society, it was seen that religion is a personal thing and not a sheikh or a sheikha to somehow get involved and tell us what and how to grow in our deen. But that's not actually in the case in Sufism. Okay, in Sufism, the sheikh directly gets involved and says, I do see that you're probably getting into a situation where the women in your job are becoming a fitna to you, or perhaps maybe the guys in your job are becoming a fitna to you. I need you to quit your job. What? Did you just ask me to quit my job? Yes, I need you to look for something else. What am I? And you expect me to just take your advice for it? So in the Sufi school, the answer is yes. The murid is expected to take their sheikh's advice and to basically take their mentorship as really something that is to help them in their deen. And they will quit their job and change their job and probably find another job and perhaps endure all the amount of hardship and etc. and so forth. So they will be, to that level that the sheikh may get, not only in giving them a recommendation, but may give things that are probably even more personal and say things like, I had noticed that you had been smoking. I can smell the smoking or the smoke in your breath, or I could see your lips turning blue because of smoking. I could see the stain of smoke on your teeth, or I could see, these kind of things, or I could see that, hey, Uthman bin Affan said, "أرى الزنا في عينيك." He said, I can see that you have the implication of zina in your eyes. Well, Amira, how did you see that? And he said, المؤمن يرى بنور الله. المؤمن, a believer, sees in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So yes, this was at the time something, and until today, there are some schools, there are some people that would be dedicated to the Sufi school, and they feel that this is important and that this sheikh is going to basically mentor me to grow in that way. Okay, let's see. A couple things. He said, له كلمات نافعة. Who's actually saying that? This is الذهبي, one very important scholar that was one of the students for Ibn Taymiyyah. He said, له كلمات نافعة ومواعظ حسنة وقدم راسخ في الطريق. قدم راسخ في الطريق. Let's see how they translated it. Right there, we're just going to see how that was translated. It was, hold on, let me see if he said, he has useful words and good ceremonies. He was firmly on the way. Not the best translation. Let me go back to the original. له كلمات نافعة. Very good orations, very good advice, very good ways of mentoring us. And مواعظ حسنة, basically within that. قدم راسخ في الطريق. He was firm on the path of guidance, basically. So قدم راسخ في الطريق, not that he's, walking firmly, but قدم راسخ في الطريق, meaning الطريق إلى الحق. And I wanted to actually quote a couple things. من كلام سهل لا معين إلا الله ولا دليل إلا رسول الله ولا زاد إلا التقوى ولا عمل إلا الصبر عليه. Look at this one. From his words, he said, there's no support but by the support from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No evidence to turn to but the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. No لا زاد إلا التقوى. No, let's call it support or something to accompany you. Is that is supposed to be the meal that you would take along? Like you take a school lunch with you because, hey, you're not going to have access to the kitchen. So you basically take, a small meal with you. That's a zad. So here, لا زاد إلا التقوى, what would actually give you the support, what would give you the armor, what would keep you running, keep you going, but nothing like taqwa, nothing but religious integrity, basically. ولا عمل إلا الصبر عليه. And no action is going to be achieved unless you basically take the moment to be patient over it. In other words, it's grit. In order for you to get basically in the level of success, you need to have grit, you need to be patient, you need to be consistent, and you need to basically recognize that you have to endure an amount of pain. Let's see, another quote, he said, الجاهل ميت والناسي نائم والعاصي سكران والمصر هالك. He said, a person that is ignorant about Islam, that is a person that is dead. And nasi mayyit, and a person that had forgotten basically the rules, basically the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is basically asleep. And a person that is of a sinner is a person that is drunk, intoxicated, and a person that is insisting to do the wrong thing is for sure going to take themselves to basically getting doomed. And he said, الجوع سر الله في أرضه لا يدعه عند من يذيع. I want you to look at this. He said one of the key things, and in order to grow in your capacity, he said, al-ju', get feeling the hunger, and feeling that let's say food deprivation is a secret that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had put on earth. What does it mean that it's a secret that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put on earth? In other words, in being hungry, in depriving yourself from foods, and not to the point that you get sick, but to the point that you're taking enough to keep you going, but not necessarily just meal after meal. And of course, and perhaps maybe a dessert after the meal and another meal because this is good, and having all these varieties, all of that is not serving your deen and not serving your body either, and certainly not serving your focus. So what is, and that's why right now they're actually talking about fasting as a way of treatment. Well, Muhammad ibn Abdullah was recommending that for all these 14,000 years right there. And he said, only the person that is committed to it is basically the one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would give them the power and the ability to stay connected and to stay firm onto it. Okay, let's say, of course, Abu Nu'aym basically quoted him saying, "Usuluna sitta." He said, our basis in keeping up with our Islam are basically six different things. And that's Abu Nu'aym في حلية الأولياء. حلية الأولياء, it's almost a nine-volume book. It's almost a nine-volume book. It's a uh, and let me explain what it means. حلية الأولياء, it's like the treasure of الأولياء, the treasure of the great predecessors of Islam, or al-awliya are the ones that were near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so their hilya, like what was their treasure? And he quotes part of those treasures that from basically Sahl ibn Abdullah, that he said, "Usuluna sitta." Our basis are six different bases. Number one, holding on to the Quran. Why are we explaining all of this? We're explaining this because وَأَنَّ هَذَا صِرَاطِي مُسْتَقِيمًا. He said, أُصُولُنَا سِتَّةً. Our foundations are basically in six different things. Number one, holding on to the Quran. Number two, الاقتداء بالسنة. الاقتداء بالسنة, taking sunnah basically as our place of example and what we would basically replicate in life. وأكل الحلال, and eating halal. وكف الأذى واجتناب الآثام, and avoiding harm and avoiding sin and avoiding واجتناب الآثام, and leaving basically anything that leads to sin. Doing tawbah, repentance to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَأَدَاءُ الْحُقُوقِ, and giving basically people their rights. Those are six key things. And that's what would be وَأَنَّ هَذَا صِرَاطِي مُسْتَقِيمًا. So how do I actually get to that? What are some of the things that the Sufi, or even taken from, it's not Sufi, just coming from, I guess, anecdotal or something that they might have experienced and learned. But no, a lot of this goes back to the Quran and Sunnah. But these shuyukh, since he is Shaykh al-Arifin, they're just helping you find it. They're just helping you recognize where it is. So he said, and here's some of those tips to give his students and to give his muridin. من تكلم فيما لا يعنيه حرم الصدق، ومن اشتغل بالفضول حرم الورع، ومن ظن السوء حرم اليقين، ومن حرم هذه الثلاثة هلك. Let's see, what does he say? He said, whoever speaks of things that are not relating to him, in other words, you're probably asking people questions that are of their concern, but it is not your business. Or probably asking questions that are really not beneficial. He said, حُرِمَ الصِّدْق. You would be deprived from honesty. Why? Because you're going to be yourself you then are going to be feeling that I don't want to expose. So you start speaking on matters that don't concern you, and then you end up making up things, and then you end up needing to change a lot of narratives, and that's why you would basically end up being deprived from being an honest person. ومن اشتغل بالفضول حرم الورع. And whoever gets into بالفضول, what is الفضول? الفضول, where you're asking people about the matters that concern them and not concern you. How much are you making a month? Do you do you plan to go anywhere this year? What do you want to do? What does your husband like? These are questions that relate to me, not to you. That's fudul. So how much, what type of name brand is this? Where did you buy it at? Well, did you get it for sale or was it not for sale? How much is your car? Was it used? Is it brand new? What is the mileage on it? How often do you use it? Do you use it? And what kind of a job do you do? All of the, unless, unless it is within the area that the person is accepting that you ask these questions and that it is to show concern. But if you're asking too many questions, which is just fudul, just for the sake of knowing, then you're going to find yourself that it's going to keep you deprived from il-wara. Il-wara is even a higher level than taqwa, because al-wara is a stage of you're afraid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you would stay away from halal and permissible things because you want to be in a position of aiming high and getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I can see someone raise their hand. Humayra, go ahead, dear.
Sheikh, I'm really sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't get the difference between the first point and the second point, حرم الصدق, and this point that you mentioned.
Okay, fair enough. So, ما لا يعني, you're basically speaking of things that don't relate to you. ما لا يعني, in general, perhaps maybe it's not of any importance. You're just talking for the sake of talking. Okay,
Mm.
getting into subjects that really don't concern you. Okay, but this one, getting into subjects that don't concern you in regards to people's matters.
So this is talking and this is asking, actually.
Yeah, I can say, yeah, I love how I love it. I love it. I couldn't have said it better. Yeah, this one's just plain talking. And this one is basically, I guess, asking and getting involved and الاشتغال can mean to ask questions and can mean to put in, some form of concern. You're concerned about people's businesses. You're
Mm-hmm.
concerned about people's spaces, and you're not concerned about your own self.
Jazakallah khairan.
Yep. وإياكم. ومن ظن السوء حرم اليقين. And if you think hard, what is ظن السوء? ظن السوء is um when you have this type of doubt. This isn't talking about skepticism, but this is doubting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That doubting, for example, well, maybe I'm being punished. Maybe you are. But why don't you look at it that maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing me to become a better person? So what are we here doing? We're redirecting our dhan, we're redirecting our skepticism to try to get to the right direction, to try to become optimistic. So dhann su can be dhann su in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and could also be dhann su on people. Dhann su on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is harming me here. Well, maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to get you into a better place. And what are you doing? Maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to forgive me. Maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive you. Why don't you look in looking at that direction of forgiveness rather than looking at the direction of punishment? But wait a minute, shouldn't we look at the direction of punishment? Yes, if the person has committed a sin, we'll remind him of the punishment. But if the person is looking that they're appearing that they're regretting what they had committed, then I would remind them of maghfirah. Now I would change that direction of how they see it. I would change it if they are showing signs of repentance. I would remind them of maghfirah. I would remind them of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's forgiveness. Same thing. If, for example, I'm ill, inshallah, I'm thinking, ظن اليقين, ظن الخير of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, will give me treatment, will give me healing. What am I doing? I'm basically having that hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's ظن in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as ظن having good in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, ظن السوء in people is usually, I would say, the starter of evil in the relationships between people. Oh, he probably did this because he was trying to intend to do this. Doubting people's intentions. Oh, this is what she meant to do. And this is what she is probably meaning by this sentence. She was just trying to get into my business, or she was trying to envy me, or she was trying to do, what do you get into? That's حرم اليقين. You would be deprived from yaqeen. You would be deprived from having certainty. Why? Because you had wired your brain into doubting everything. Then in that situation, your brain is going to be doubting in everything that surrounds it. You're going to live into this paranoia. Then this paranoia is going to go beyond the parameter of doubting people to doubting Allah, to even perhaps doubting everything in Islam. And then you'll end up basically getting into that loss of certainty even in deen. And this is extremely important because the mindset that you may be living in is a result of what you had trained your body in. You had trained your brain to live in doubting people. You're going to get into then doubting even Allah. That's حرم اليقين. You're going to start getting into that parameter of losing certainty, perhaps even in Islam, because you continued in allowing your brain to get into this paranoia. You allowed it. Same thing if we're talking about من تكلم فيما لا يعنيه حرم الصدق, because you kept on speaking of different matters. There's no way that if you continue to keep من كثر كلامه كثر سقطه, if you keep talking, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. So what do? We basically learn how to reduce from the talk in order to be able to hear more, to get better ilm, and to be selective in what we say. When we're selective in what we say, then you can assure that this person is basically honest in what they're saying. And certainly the person that is going to get into this type of fudul and get into people's businesses, then they're going to later on probably envy this person. Envy contradicts wara. Envy contradicts wara. Envy, because you're then feeling deprived, and then you're going to start thinking bad. Why didn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give me this? That's going to take away your wara. That's going to take away your religious integrity, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was giving us sharia for what? لا تقربوا الفواحش ما ظهر منها وما بطن. We're supposed to be training ourselves to stay away from the different sins of the ones that are apparent and the ones that are not apparent, but at least concealed within our hearts. That's what will get us into wara. So how do we get into that? He said, من أخلاق الصديقين أن لا يحلفوا بالله ألا يحلفوا بالله وألا يغتابوا ولا يغتاب عندهم وأن لا يشبعوا وإذا وعدوا لم يخلفوا ولا يمزحون أصلا. يا سلام. He said, from the akhlaq of الصديقين. What is a siddiq? A siddiq is a saint. But of course, when we think of saints, we usually think of Catholics, okay? But of course, in Islam, no, there is a level of Siddiqeen. So what is a Siddiq anyways? What do you mean a saint? A saint in the Catholic term is basically, a person that probably had been endorsed to having miracles, blah, 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 all these different things. But a Siddiq in Islam is a person that was basically Sadiq. They were living the honesty of relating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that in action, their actions and inactions, they would literally apply what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had ordered them to do in words and action. Their actions speak the level of Quran, speak akhlaq al-Islam. They're so honest, not only in words, but even in action. In other words, they are living honesty, sincerity, and commitment to the level of action, words, and certainly to the core of even their heart. That's a Siddiq. He said, أَلَّا يَحْلِفُوا بِاللَّهِ. In other words, لا يحلفوا, basically, إلا بالله. They would only do it for the sake of Allah. That when they make an oath, they would only do it in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or that لا يحلفوا بالله. In other words, they don't even need to swear by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because people can see that these people are honest. They don't even need to do half because people are really trusting their honesty. They don't even need to say any or make any oath. وَأَلَّا يَغْتَابُوا. They would not speak ill of people. They would not speak in any way harming people's reputation or anything of that sort. So therefore, they would not لا يغتابوا. They would not speak about people, not harm people's reputation or harm people behind their back. ولا يغتاب عندهم. Not only do they not get involved in ghaiba, but even no one dares to even speak ill of people in their presence. This is extremely important. People that are present, they recognize that this person is a Siddiq, that they recognize that I cannot even make a lie in front of them or talk ill about other people. Why? Because this person does not allow that, and people recognize their religious integrity. And they recognize that, they're going to silence me if I were to start. So they don't speak about people. وَأَلَّا يَشْبَعُوا. And they would not eat to a level of full stomach. وَإِذَا وَعَدُوا لَمْ يُخْلِفُوا. And when they promise, they don't break their promises. وَلَا يَمْزَحُونَ أَصْلًا. And they don't even joke around. Let me pause for a second here. المزاح. What does المزاح mean and where does it come from? المزاح means joking around. Now, scholars actually had different, let's call it, takes on muzah. The first group of scholars, they said il-muzah that is haram is basically muzah where you're probably mocking people, putting people down. That's a muzah that is haram. Two, المزاح that can be as number one, it contains sidq. There's nothing wrong, there's nothing that is of any mockery on people. It's all true, that it is to a certain level, not overdoing it, that it's permissible. Why? They said, we've got an evidence on that. What is your evidence? They said, well, the Prophet ﷺ, that woman that came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, well, make dua, that old woman that came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I would enter Jannah. And he said, Jannah doesn't actually have any old people going in there. She started crying. And then he read to her the ayah إِنَّا أَنشَأْنَاهُنَّ إِنشَاءً فَجَعَلْنَاهُنَّ أَبْكَارًا, that they would be recreated to the point that they would even be recreated in being virgin. So that's when they said, well, here's the Prophet ﷺ right there making a muzah that is within the perimeter of halal. Another guy comes to the Prophet ﷺ or another woman, and she said that my husband is inviting you over. And he said, is that the guy that has white in his eyes? Well, she understood it as cataract. But she said, no, no, he doesn't have white in his eyes. But then he explained it that we're talking about the white, around, which is, I'm not sure what the scientific word for it is, but we're looking around the pupil, basically, the whiteness around the eyes. So that's what he was referring to. And she was thinking that it was the cataract. So that's the second stage of muzah. Number three stage of muzah is basically a person that makes a fool out of themselves. They don't take anything seriously. They're continuously just making everything a joke. This person becomes a clown. And that's where the scholars, they said, well, the root of it is from the word zaha. Zaha actually means to take something off a certain path. So some scholars, they said, سُمِّيَ الْمُزَاحُ مُزَاحًا لأنه زاح صاحبه عن الحق, because صاحبه لأنه زاح صاحبه عن الحق, because it took away the person that engages in frequent joking, it takes them away from truth. زاح صاحبه عن الحق, takes them away from haqq, takes them away from truth. They just get used to being such a joke that they eventually stay away from haqq. So this is basically just a little bit of what some of the things that he had said. And let's see when he died. He died ثلاثا في سنة 73 وليس بشيء و200. Okay, so basically 283 Hijriya is when he died. Okay, so let's see what al-Qurtubi wanted to say. He said, عليكم بالاقتداء بالأثر والسنة فإني أخاف أنه سيأتي عن قليل زمان إذا ذكر إنسان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم والاقتداء به في جميع أحواله ذموه ونفروا عنه وتبرؤوا منه وأذلوه وأهانوه. He said, the quote, hold on and be committed to replicating and committing to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and basically his path. And for I fear that one day there's going to come a time that if anybody would say the Prophet ﷺ had done such and such and talk about how we should replicate and mimic and imitate the Prophet ﷺ in all different corners of our life, that they would be dhammuh, that they would be mocked, that they would be ridiculed, or they would be basically speaking ill of that person, and that they would be repelling away from that person, and tabarra'u min, and they would then say, it has nothing to do with us. This is, in other words, abandon this person and not relate to this person. وَأَذَلُّوهُ وَأَهَانُوهُ, and they would basically humiliate this person and also be condescending to that person. I want you to look at this. This is the same thing as our times. If you hold on to the Quran and Sunnah, they might actually, one, call you extreme or call you perhaps confused. That's what we would say in Palestine. They would call them, if a person is religious, they call them mit'a'id. This is what they say, what they call mit'a'id, which basically means this person is so confused. This person is so connected to the deen to the point that they're confused about themselves. They're just so rigid. This is what they'll call them. They'll call them rigid, they'll call them confused, etc. I don't know, right now I've been away from Palestine for 20 years. I wonder if any of this changed or whether it got worse. I don't really know, but that's what they used to call them at the time. So if you held on to the religion, they'll call you confused, they'll call you rigid, they'll call you extreme. Remember the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ basically said in the hadith, that بدأ الإسلام غريبا وسيعود غريبا. Islam started out in a strange way and it will come back in a strange way. And of course, the scholar that narrated this hadith said فطوبى للغرباء, and glad tidings for those that would be regarded as strange by other people, because they would be the ones that would be committed. They would be the ones that would be connected to the religion and definitely different than the other paths of other people. So Sahl, same guy, إنما ظهرت البدع على يدي أهل السنة لأنهم ظاهروهم وقاولوهم فظهرت أقاويلهم وفشت في العامة فسمعه من لم يكن يسمعه فلو تركوهم ولم يكلمهم لمات كل واحد منهم على ما في صدره ولم يظهر منه شيء وحمله معه إلى قبره. And he said the bid'ah or innovation basically had appeared, of course, when we're talking about basically those that opposed Sunnah. And that's when they would start making up their own words, their own paths, and they would make their own anecdotal ways of creating a different way for perhaps making a spiritual direction, spiritual mentorship, and they might call it motivational speeches, different ways of, yeah, we're going to be singing together, we're going to be bringing in a doof, we're going to be making nasheeds, we're going to be making different ways of probably movements, or we're going to be making games, etc. Well, when did that happen? Well, that's because it's going to be at the expense of learning Sunnah. So he said this became flourished within the society, and then certainly they would adopt it, and they would hear it, they would adopt it, and then if they had basically left all of those that had been doing all those innovations and they hung on to the Sunnah, then that would have been basically the key route to helping them find Jannah. But of course, if you're holding on to a different path, to a different method, then you're going to find yourself basically leaving off as Sunnah. When in Sunnah, that basically contains all that you need to help you stay on the path of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had said, وَأَنَّ هَذَا صِرَاطِي مُسْتَقِيمًا. And this path is the path of istiqamah, is the path of the straight path, and a path to basically leading you to Jannah. All right, let's see. Sahel also said, لا يحدث أحدكم بدعة حتى يحدث له إبليس عبادة فيتعبد بها ثم يحدث له بدعة فإذا نطق بالبدعة ودعا الناس إليها نزع منه تلك الخذمة. Okay, what does that mean? So, or الحدمة, could say that الخدمة or الحدمة. And he said, وَلَمْ نَتَبَيَّنُهَا. In other words, he didn't really know what that means. I have to search for if there are other words and what that means. But anyhow, let's see. He said, لا يحدث أحدكم بدعة. Anybody that would innovate and start an innovation, Iblis would then make it as the new method for ibadah, as the new method of religiosity, as a new method for spirituality. فَيَتَعَبَّدَ بِهَا. Then they would use that as a way for spirituality, for growing in their deen, and then it would develop into a new set of innovation, and then they would speak about it, and then they would invite others to it, and then what happens is that would basically take away from their commitment to Sunnah, their commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Let's see, Sahel also said, لا أعلم حديثا جاء في المبتدعة أشد من هذا الحديث. He said, I do not know any hadith that had come describing those that would be innovators worse than this one. Or at least, more more what is the word? But at a high level of expressing the dangers of it. حجب الله الجنة عن صاحب كل بدعة. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had prevented and kept Jannah away from every single person that would create or make an innovation. And they said, قال فاليهودي والنصراني أرجى منهم. He said, and in fact, the Jews and the Christians probably have a better hope than the hope that you would have for that person. Another quote, من أراد أن يكرم دينه فلا يدخل على السلطان ولا يخلون بالنسوان ولا يخاصمن أهل الأهواء. وقال أيضا اتبعوا ولا تبتدعوا فقد كفيتم. He said, whoever wants Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to expand their commitment to their deen, then don't enter upon a sultan. Upon a sultan meaning the government, meaning it doesn't have to be the president alone, but it can be anywhere the government. So in other words, stay away from government resources because that's going to keep you maintaining your religious integrity. ولا يخلون بالنسوان, and do not be alone with women. In other words, avoid women. Is that for us too? No. For you ladies, you're going to avoid men. Okay? ولا يخاصمن أهل الأهواء, and don't get into debates with those that are أهل الأهواء. What's the difference between أهل الأهواء and أهل البدعة? أهل الأهواء are basically the people of sin. أهل البدعة are the people of innovation. البدعة is involving religion. Maybe, for example, I don't know, creating a new way for getting better spirituality, and perhaps we're going to sit together and I don't know, like a yoga position and start doing Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. We're doing to what? Well, we're working out or probably doing yoga and saying Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Right? Is that the sunnah? No, it's not. But I'm embedding Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad as I'm doing this workout. All right? That's not the sunnah. It says a bid'ah to do yoga, which is a Buddhist religion, a Buddhist form of spirituality, and add on to it some kind of a dhikr. You're basically making a bid'ah right there. Okay, now when you look at لا يخاصمنا خاصمنا أهل الأهواء, sorry, which basically means the people that are sinners, people of sin. They live their life based on sin. They live their life away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't get involved with these people. Once you find yourself in getting involved with these people or even fighting them, or probably getting involved even if that meant opposing them, you're going to find yourself, you're being attacked by these people, and it will provoke you to go down to their level. They start yelling, they start saying bad words. You're going to find yourself, without you realizing that, you know what, I'm here going to compete of how bad my words can go. And it provokes you to go to their level. So he said, don't even go to their level. Don't even associate with them. You know what? Don't even fight these kind of people because they could drag you to their level of lowness. And he said, اتبعوا ولا تبتدعوا, and follow the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and do not innovate because you had the resources that were enough for your deen. Now, I want you to see right now that we read all of this, now that we see that, of course, when they would basically say, or when we would say, الذهبي, call him as Shaykh al-Arifin in the Sufi Zahid, you could say he was a person committed to not making a bid'ah, not making an innovation. And that's one thing, is that what you would see Sufis today doing, and perhaps even quoting Tustari and not recognizing that Tustari himself was really committed to Sunnah, you would see that the definition of Sufism today has a lot of differences compared to the Sufism that Tustari actually was teaching and preaching. All right, what we're gonna do, you know what, should I, yeah, well, yeah, I don't want to get into all of this. Let me see. What we're gonna do, well, let me stop right here because to be honest, I'm starting to get tired myself. All right. So we're gonna stop right here. Inshallah, we'll continue tomorrow. We've got some more to say in regards to, let me see, got Umar bin Abdul Aziz, we got that one. Ishab, we're gonna talk about, oh, here's Sahel ibn Abdullah again, and Sufyan al-Thawri, Abu al-Aliya. So basically, بعض العلماء العارفين. We're gonna talk about this one, inshallah. So, inshallah, we'll come back to continuing this, inshallah, tomorrow. And Rabbi yahfadhku. Let's see. What is bid'ah? What to say bid'ah? Okay, so bid'ah comes from the word bada'a, which basically means to innovate. To innovate actually means to start something that was not practiced before. So think of, when you're making an invention, but you're inventing something in the deen in the deen. So is a laptop a bid'ah? No, it's not. That's not in the deen. This is a tool in dunya, not in deen. So when you say in deen, like adding things that were not done by the Prophet ﷺ to the prayer, to probably spirituality, or probably doing, I don't know, different things, thinking that this would be a good way of becoming more spiritual, more dedicated, it would keep you connected, etc. That would be a bid'ah if it is not done by the Prophet ﷺ. Did I answer that one? Let's see, the sister is saying, if someone feels abandoned by Allah but still keeps turning back to Him, what does this indicate spiritually? And how should he navigate this state? Fair enough. So it definitely does reflect that the person is having some kind of a struggle. And many times this struggle can be external, meaning certain friends, certain family members, etc. They're probably dragging him into that area. And it could be internal, that the problem is within, that this person is having certain weaknesses. So then, therefore, a sheikh might say, are these weaknesses a result of what you might be saying, what you might be engaging in, what you're looking at, what you're getting yourself busy with, or maybe what you're not getting yourself busy with. What you're not getting yourself busy with. Maybe you need to do more istighfar. Maybe you need to do more dhikr. Maybe you need to do more qira'at Quran. Maybe you need to do more talab al-ilm. Maybe, so sometimes there are things to do extra, and sometimes there are things to eliminate. Maybe I need to reduce talking to that person because they keep on provoking me to talk about X or Y and Z and committing ghaiba. Or maybe I need to reduce from this kind of conversation with that person because they keep getting me into music and basically social media and TikTok and all these different things. So I need to avoid this person because they're a fitna to me. So that's a basically another thing that we basically need to sometimes see, is it within or is it outside of me that's basically causing me to go back to the same sin that I had committed? What is provoking you into getting engaged into that sin again? So that's what you want to research. Is it the time? Is it the place? Maybe if I keep going back to the sin, is it the time? Maybe I need to not be alone on my laptop. Maybe I need to get access to another person that is with me to let them, I guess, see maybe my internet access. Maybe I need to get into a moment of less alone time, or maybe I need more alone time. So that's when a good sheikh would be capable of helping you. But sometimes if you don't have a sheikh, or you don't have access to a sheikh to help you see your life and all of that, sometimes you be your own sheikh and say, okay, now I recognize. And trust me, that's even way better because when you are basically overseeing yourself, you know how much you're eating. You know what you're eating. You know your choices of friends. You know your choices of and what you do in private and when no one's seeing. You know everything. So if you know everything, then you're going to look at, okay, this is when I commit this sin. This is when I go back to it. When I'm around this person, or when I'm alone, or when I'm around basically around this and having access to that. So then you would have to work on it by knowing what provokes it. So I hope I answered that one. Let's see. The sister said, I actually couldn't hear you when people say something that is innovation. So when people say innovation, Sister Martina, what are you trying to say? I'm confused.
Sorry, I'm sorry, I confused you. You're saying that people say Sallallahu Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam when you're talking. I missed that. I was wondering, what did you say? What is bid'ah?
Okay,
I know
what is bid'ah in that? So
I
this
know that.
person is doing a yoga. This person is
Oh,
doing a yoga, and while they're doing yoga, okay, they think that by doing yoga and saying Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad while doing yoga, that it basically increases your spirituality and your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then we're gonna say, wait a minute, that's a bid'ah. Go back, go back, go back.
oh. So
All right.
while we are doing exercise, while we are walking, we
So if
can.
you wanna, while you're walking, that's a sunnah. If you're walking and doing your dhikr, that's a sunnah. That's not a bid'ah.
Okay.
Or you're probably, I don't know, walking on the treadmill and doing that dhikr. That's a good thing. That's not a bid'ah.
Okay. Then what
Okay,
is bid'ah then?
the yoga. You just the yoga piece. This person
Okay.
is doing yoga and they're doing that dhikr. That's
Okay.
a all right.
That's exercise. I mean, that's not exercise.
Yoga is not exercise.
Okay.
I mean, they consider it
Yeah,
as it is.
Ustad, some kinds of, it's because meditation, that's not allowed
The
in our Islam,
meditation,
right?
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
But if
yeah.
you are, if you're doing yoga and you're not doing it as the instructor tells you to do it as, okay?
Oh,
But
yeah.
you're doing, I guess different movements and different bodily movements and etc., to help you with stretches, that's not haram. But
Oh,
if you are doing,
all the
these breaths and you're thinking of this and try to think on the inside, try to think of your own breathing, try to hear yourself and all of that. Sorry, that's a meditation. That's bid'ah.
got it. Got it now. Thank you. Jazakallah khair. Sorry.
وإياكم وإياكم.
When we miss something, then I miss everything. Astaghfirullah. I just
Yeah,
went out.
no problem, dear. Humaira, you also had your hand risen. What did you want to say?
Sheikh, I wanted to ask, saying the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in tasbih, like some people say 111 times, yes, Samia in the morning, it's an innovation.
That's a good question. That's a very good question. Humaira, girl, you are a genius. Let me tell you one thing. Um, Even though I broke down the definition of bid'ah and I said if it's not following the sunnah
Mhm.
in deen, okay? But what is the parameter? That's one thing that scholars actually had differences of opinions about and on. Let me explain it. So, is it a bid'ah, for example, to read Quran on water and pour it over myself as a form of healing?
Mhm.
Well, is it a bid'ah or not? It's, hey, I'm reading Quran on this water and I'm pouring over myself. Now, some scholars would consider that the parameters of bid'ah, if we're talking about spirituality, that if it was not done by the Prophet ﷺ, then therefore it's a bid'ah, end of the story. Other scholars, they'll say, well, if I have a general quote that allows me to do that, just like لا بأس بالرقى ما لم يكن فيها شرك. There's no harm in doing ruqya as long as it doesn't contain shirk. So, does that include me reading Quran, maybe the three quls over this water, and then pouring it over myself? I used Quran and I read Quran over water. I didn't use any shirk, didn't get into any voodoo or anything of that sort. No, just Quran, reading it over water. First opinion, according to the first opinion of the scholars, they'll say that's a bid'ah. The second opinion, they'll say not necessarily a bid'ah because the Prophet ﷺ gave a general statement and he said, لا بأس بالرقى ما لم يكن فيها شرك. As long as there's no shirk in it, then based on that general statement, in ruqya, then that would be permissible. So things like, maybe, can I do my own dhikr? Well, I mean, I want to do my own dhikr just on my own and say something like, Ya Allah, the one that created all these beautiful leaves and these beautiful twigs on it, and every single raindrop that falls, tasbih, Ya Allah, let be Alhamdulillah for the number of every single raindrop that basically falls, and the number of trees, leaves on the trees, and the number of atoms in every single molecule, and all of that. Is that a bid'ah? According to the first one, they'll say, well, you basically made your own dhikr. Why don't you just stick to al-ma'thur and that's it? According to the second opinion, they said, well, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it because even even the Prophet ﷺ, when he had heard that Sahabi, that, well, he had seen that Sahabi first, and he said that he had seen 33 angels come to take that dhikr that he had done. And was it something that the Prophet ﷺ had done before? No. So that was their evidence, the second opinion. They said as long as it is within the parameters, within, let's say, the maxims of what the Prophet ﷺ or the statements in the Quran and Sunnah had basically said it is permissible to do it within, and therefore that would not be a bid'ah. So if I'm going to, for example, look at that parameter, so according to the first opinion, reading Quran on water is going to be a bid'ah. The second opinion will say, well, no, but the hadith basically told me as long as I'm not doing shirk, that's permissible. So I'm just going to read Quran on water and I'm going to pour it over myself. And I've tried it before and it worked, somebody might say. Okay. And by the way, I've tried it before and it worked. Okay. Same thing. If we're talking about, for example, we're doing tasbih. I'm going to do subhanallah walhamdulillah, or probably read Rabbi la tadharni fardan wa anta khayrul warithin 40 times. Okay? 40 times. And I guarantee you, someone will say, I guarantee you, bi-idhnillah, you will get, if you don't have kids, you will get pregnant if you are basically married, and if you are not married, you will get a proposal and get married, somebody might say. Okay? Do it 40 times. رَبِّ لَا تَذَرْنِي فَرْدًا وَأَنْتَ خَيْرُ الْوَارِثِينَ. According to the first opinion, wait a minute, where did you bring that from? That's a bid'ah. The first opinion, that's a bid'ah. The second opinion, they'll say, well, no, we actually have certain evidence. What is your evidence? Well, the ayah in Surah Al Imran, when Prophet Zakaria made the dua, Rabbi la tadarni farda wa anta khayrul warithin. Where did you get the 40 from? Oh, just my own experience. I had done it before and all of that, the person might say. Okay, can I do it 30? Well, I mean, yeah, sure, but just keep connected to رَبِّ لَا تَذَرْنِي فَرْدًا وَأَنْتَ خَيْرُ الْوَارِثِينَ. But I did it for 40 days, somebody might say, not me. Okay, somebody might say, I've done it for 40 days and it worked. And I got a proposal and I got married, somebody might say. So can we use this personal experience, as long as it doesn't contradict Quran and Sunnah in the general phrase and the general frame of Quran and Sunnah? First opinion, no. Second opinion, yes, you can.
And the
Okay?
preponderant,
For what?
just to be on the safe,
For which one?
the dhikr, for example.
For the dhikr, wallahu a'lam, it's basically the Shafi'i opinion is that it is permissible to actually do as long as it does not contradict, let's say, intricate details in Quran and Sunnah.
Mhm. I
So
get it.
to
Jazakallah khair.
do the dua or to read Quran on water, for example, and wash with it and so forth, that yes, it is permissible. Okay, that's wallahu alam is the preponderant.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh.
All right, or even رَبِّ لَا تَذَرْنِي فَرْدًا وَأَنْتَ خَيْرُ الْوَارِثِينَ. Every single Fajr, I'm gonna say it for, I don't know, as long as I'm able to basically say I'm gonna be committed to it, and you basically committed to it for who knows, and tell me if it happens with you. For 40 days, I've had a number of different people that actually tried it, and even though there's no evidence, again, there's no evidence, okay?
Should I try,
But
Sheikh?
it's just anecdote. Go ahead, dear. Go ahead. الله يا ربي يرزقك الزوج الصالح يا ربي. اللهم آمين. ربي لا تذرني فردا وأنت خير
Jazakallah
الوارثين.
khair.
All right. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ya Rabbi grant you a pious husband. Allahumma ameen. It's raining here, so
Jazakallah khair.
inshallah dua mustajab. This is the sunnah to make the
Usta-
dua during
Ustaja,
rain.
Ustaja,
Mhm.
you said two opinion. Like first opinion is they said bida, and second
Yes.
opinion they said permissible.
Yes,
Which one
permissible.
actually? Which one is more strong opinion? Between two.
So
I
that's a good question. So when you say a person that has a stronger opinion, okay, that would really depend on the person and their, I would say their research. And many times a personal influence may play a key role in how we understand what basically has stronger evidence. So in other words, I may bring in, we could do a study together, okay? And we're going to bring in the hadith for the first opinion, and I bring in the hadith for the second opinion, and tell you, you know what, here it is. All those hadith right there, all those, let's call them these arguments right there. We're going to display their arguments and display basically their points of views and how they support their argument. We might have 50% of you might actually say, you know what? I think the first opinion has a stronger evidence. 50,
yeah.
the other 50% might say,
I am
actually,
I am
sorry,
also
I
thinking
agree with
first
the second
opinion.
opinion.
Yeah,
You
I'm
like the
also
first opinion?
I like
That's
to
okay.
follow the first opinion because I learned from Sheikh like something like dua or zikr, something restricted by time number and time
Mhm.
number, and some dua and zikr unrestricted by time number. So
Okay.
I want to follow like whatever Prophet Muhammad follow, right? You have the
There you
ruqya
go.
or
So
yeah, that's
again, in general, both the first opinion and the second opinion speak against bid'ah. But then they had debated on the perimeter of where is the limit of
mm-hmm,
bid'ah. They both agreed that we're against bid'ah,
mm-hmm.
but
Okay.
then they disagreed on the perimeter of how far does this go? Can I depend on a general text? Can I depend on a general text, just like this general text? لا بأس
I
بالرقى ما لم يكن فيها شرك. Can I
yeah.
depend on that general text, or do I need a
Yeah, but
specific?
unrestricted, right? I can make dua anytime in generally, but that's not habited. Like every morning, 40 times this dua, every evening for 40 times this dua.
There
That
are
in that
ahadith.
Ustaza, in that case, we have to dalil, right? We have to bring evidence, like Prophet Muhammad or Sahabi, they practice this dua morning time 40 or evening time 40. Otherwise, if I make habit, that's bida, right, Ustada? Because
So
yeah,
to the first opinion, yes, they'll
yeah,
consider that
yes,
yes,
yeah,
if
yeah,
you
yeah,
stick to a number, let's say I'm doing Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad 1,000 times every day, for example.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
That's not.
And I'm doing it on Fajr time, and I'm doing it in a specific corner, etc. And both opinions actually will consider if you're doing it at a specific time, a specific number, a specific day,
Yeah, yeah,
you're
yeah.
making it a ritual. Both opinions will consider that a bid'ah. Okay. But
Yes, yes.
can I do it at times? The first opinion will say, I mean, yes, you are encouraged to do 1,000 times or probably 500 times or whatever, but the first opinion will say, well, wait a minute, why did you choose Fajr time? Well, I mean, that's my dhikr time. That's my, early morning dhikr, and that's what I'm doing it in. They'll probably say, well, the Prophet ﷺ, we don't have records of the Prophet ﷺ, you doing that as a regimen every single Fajr, that's what he would say. We do have other ahadith that he was saying, لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له له الملك وله
Yeah,
الحمد
yeah.
يحيي ويميت وهو على كل شيء قدير 100 times. We've got that hadith in Tirmidhi. I want you to stick to that.
Yes, yes,
First
yes.
opinion will say, I want you to stick to that. The second opinion will say, well, I mean, you can have your own regimen of the number of ahadith or the number of du'as or the number of adhkar or what you want to do as an adhkar or probably a specific ayah or specific probably a so the second opinion would say, I mean, you can also, as long as it doesn't not go against the Quran and Sunnah in the general definition of Sunnah, then they'll consider that that's okay. She's got her own regimen of doing Salah ala Nabi 1,000 times every morning. That's her own regimen.
Okay, okay.
Just like, for example, when you're talking about reading Surah Al-Kahf every single Friday,
Mhm.
we've got no hadith sahih. I know that's going to break everybody. I mean, what are you talking about? Yes, we don't have a hadith sahih,
Yeah,
but
yeah. Some scholars say that. Yeah.
right, but we do have this as a practice of the Salihin throughout history.
Mhm.
Throughout history, at least from the time of the Prophet ﷺ. We do have
Mhm.
that as a practice. Same thing if
Mhm.
we're talking about, for example, a lot of hadith that are not authentic in regards to certain ayat, reading, for example, Surah Al-Waqi'ah, and you will not be poor, or reading ayat for perhaps Surah Yasin on the dead or anything like that. There's no evidence, at least that hadith are not authentic, but اقرأوا Surah Yasin على موتاكم, meaning while they're dying, while they're in the process of dying. That's what it was talking about. All right. But can I read it on a dead person? Can I go and read al-Fatiha? I went to visit my I guess my relative's grave, and I read al-Fatiha on their grave. Is that permissible or is that a bid'ah?
It's a
There's
bid'ah.
It's a bid'ah. Okay. The first
Yeah.
opinion will tell you bid'ah. The second opinion will say, I mean, we're just reading, not necessarily for their sake, but we're just reading as a way of trying to connect to our dhikr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we're just reading Quran. Okay, maybe not read it on the grave, because the sunnah is to say, Assalamu alaikum dara qawmin mu'mineen, antum as-sabiqun, wa nahnu insha'Allahu bikum lahiqun, Allahumma ighfir lana wa lahum warhamna warhamhum wa la tahrimna ajrahum, etc. All right. ولا تفتنا بعدهم. Now, here's the thing, is that the second opinion, they'll be really strict and say, wait a minute, right there. The second opinion didn't say that that was permissible, but they said we would discourage from reading something like al-Fatiha, because then it becomes like a ritual. But if you wanted to do further dua for the dead person, and perhaps maybe even wanted to go as far as maybe getting a palm tree leaf and sticking it into the grave. For the first opinion, they said, well, this is khas bin Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. What are you doing? Only the Prophet ﷺ had done it because he is blessed when he got that palm tree twig, and he just put it in there, and he said that that's going to make it less painful on their grave. That's khas bin Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. The second opinion, they said, well, I mean, okay, but it is khas bin Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, but can I do it too and actually put, I don't know, flowers or maybe a twig from a palm tree, and just to imitate the Prophet ﷺ in that sense. I don't know if it works, but I'm just doing something that the Prophet ﷺ had done. Maybe I would be, trying to also show that I'm here testifying that this person is a salih person, etc. So I'm doing something like this. The second opinion might say, well, it is within the perimeter of makruh, but not necessarily entirely haram or bid'ah. Okay. And of course, by the way, even the second opinion, I actually combined, the second opinion itself has almost 6 different types, okay? 6 different groups of sort 6 different paths of different opinions almost. So I'm just making all those basically put in 2 categories to make it easier for you.
Okay.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. But in general, of course, definitely sticking to the Sunnah as the first opinion would regard is the safest. There's no doubt about that.
Yes.
No
Yes,
question.
I like it. I like the first opinion, yeah. For
Yep.
my
No
yes.
question that it's always safer and that you are more likely to confuse your paths in the second one. And but at the same time, I would just say before you rush and you start fighting people, bid'ah, what are you doing? And etc. I would say just understand that, there are different parameters, unless this is a clear bid'ah, then that's a different story. So this is it, inshallah. I will be giving, inshallah, a lecture on bid'ah and the parameters of it. There's a very good book that was written by my professor. It's called Islam اتباع الابتداع for my professor Hussam al-Din Afana. I actually taught that book a couple times, but inshallah, maybe how about reading Surah al-Baqarah daily? That could be that's a very good regimen. It's not a bid'ah at all. Go ahead if you're able to do that. I was doing it for some time in my life, and then, subhanallah, I mean, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive me, I guess downgraded, and hopefully I will upgrade again, inshallah. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Let me just stop right there.